Hello, trading is closed on October 6th, 2020. Let's do our disclaimer, review our calls, and then make a prediction. This is my plan for tomorrow, Wednesday, October 7th, 2020. No guarantee it's right. If we gap sharply in the undesired direction, the call's killed before the open. Please observe my rules. Here's my email. Well, normally, when you get a move like this in response to a news event, the rule is it gets reversed quickly and completely. I'm not really convinced that's going to happen here, in part because even without the news event, you could justify this being the end of the move. Let's first review what we said. Look for the pattern with the early high. We got that. Tomorrow's pattern also has the early high. We said the pattern typically rallies to a high in the final hour, and failure is a straight line drop. Well, that's your final hour high, and this would be failure. Here's what we said. We got the higher prices. Doesn't mean you have to have a higher close. We also said the minimum target for the rally was hit yesterday. We said it wasn't to stop and reverse, but the gap over this line wasn't obliged to go higher than it did yesterday. Now, Friday's pattern featured a wall into the close, which almost always follows through. Instead, we gapped up. This is a hole-in-the-wall gap. It's an unstable pattern. It usually fills pretty quickly. In fact, it usually fills quicker than this. And this number, 33.48.42, becomes a support area. So typically what happens is if you rally like this, you fill the gap, find support at this number, then you resume the rally. But if this thing falls with conviction, support becomes resistance. So if we get much under this and can't recover it, that's very negative. Then you've got resistance at this level instead of support. We said Friday's pattern was pretty negative. A crash was even possible. That was killed when we gapped up. But by undercutting this low on Monday, we've now marked this as a false move. And the possible crash scenario is back on the table. I don't like to call crashes. Let's just say a sharp move down is back on the table. And it could even be sharper because you've trapped all these longs over the beginning part of the week. Now, early on, MEJT gave a buy signal, but that just means a higher price prints. It doesn't predict the next move. We have what looked like a pretty sizable drop. MEJT said it wouldn't stick and price would recover, which they did. The afternoon, MEJT said this drop wasn't the real thing. We go higher. And this impressive-looking rally we got in the afternoon, MEJT was a false movement would retrace. It didn't say we'd retrace like this, but it said we'd retrace. Now, I have to tell you, when I saw this afternoon, I was kind of champing at the bit looking for a place to go long, but because I knew the price would retrace, I didn't. I don't mind missing a winner as long as I avoid taking a loser. This is far too fast for me to get involved on the short side, but at least I didn't get burned on the long side, and that's how the system helps you out. Speaking of systems, I've given up on Tom Demark's stuff, but these green numbers are his combo sell signal. The last 3 bars don't have to obey all the rules. We're on a weekly combo sell, and the longer the duration of the bar, and a week is pretty long because originally it was for a day, The longer the duration of the bar, the steeper the drop when it works. Again, a lot of these just haven't worked at all, so I've kind of given up. But just be aware, if we get a drop, his stuff is compatible with it. Now, we said yesterday we'd gone as high as we had to go to recover from this. It wasn't to stop and reverse, but we didn't really go too much further. The general idea, so I'm looking for a drop here which will emulate blue A down. This still isn't that we really have to undercut some of these lows. Until you undercut some of these lows, you really haven't accomplished anything. It's still at least possible to recover, although after a drop like today's, it doesn't seem very plausible at the present time. I have a number of ways to count this. This is one of them. You've got good fibrillation chips, and it shows us topping out right at the Fibonacci target. And don't forget, this is hundreds of points of drop here. That's something like a 400-point drop. If we get a drop similar to that, we would, if this is right, and if green C equals green A, we wind up around 3,053, and my previous target was 3,047, and that's close enough. But again, just because that target works, it doesn't mean other targets do not, and that you still haven't undercut these lows. Till these fall, you really have to be prepared to get your eraser out. Well, tomorrow's pattern has the early high, could still gap down. Today's normally bullish pattern failed. We got the straight line drop variation. And typically when you see that, it's followed by additional weakness. It doesn't mean you have to close lower, but we should trade lower unless you gap and overtake today's high promptly. That, at the moment, seems like a very tall order, to say the least. So, tomorrow's pattern has the early high. You've got support resistance at 33, 48, 42. If we keep dropping like a stone, which is what futures are doing, when I started to record this, you could easily be in that wave blue C down that I've been expecting for some time. And that's today's call.